Here we go. Good evening, folks. Good evening. I hope that you can hear me. I hope that my audio is playing the right, man. Just give us a little shout out in the chat and let me know if I'm acting like a robot or whatnot. Okay, cool. I see you've got Stevie Crane in the house. Right, big man. Zook. Alright, mate. Ragnar. What Tyler? Rob D. Good evening. Good evening. Unfortunately, we don't have the big man here with us today. He's not recovered. Still feeling a bit under the weather. But we've got Sensum here, who's gravel microphone. Hang on a second. Oops. Is that any better? Let us know if that's any better in the chat, please, gents. And I'll let Sensum introduce yourself and say hello.
Good evening, folks. Hope everybody's well on this wonderful day today. Hope you've been out in it. It's been mustard. I've been out in it today, and all I've heard is people just moaning, "Oh, it's too hot, it's too hot." Pay thousands of pounds to get weather like this, and they're moaning about it being too hot, bloody idiots. Anyway, when we, like Scottish Tam's just said that Bonnie Lad won't be joining us this evening, so it's just the two of us. As the link that you see there, you know, if you can subscribe to Bonnie Lad's channel, if he's recovered next week, he'll probably do the Great British Quiz next Saturday. He will confirm that himself. He did say that last night when we did a little impromptu sort of sound checky thing yesterday. And like I say, it should be a good. And he invests a lot of time and effort in those quizzes, you know. So a bit of support, and like I say, because he keeps on getting strikes off YouTube for basically telling the truth or showing things which don't really follow the narrative that they want to promote. His main channel keeps on getting strikes, so he's pushing. You know, just in case it ever got disbanded, he's trying to drum up a little bit of support on his quiz channel, and he's going to make that his dedicated channel for quizzes. So if you can do a quick sub and check of Bonnie Lad's new quiz channel, that would be much appreciated. Tam, how's you going, mate? Have you got your sound ready?
Oh, mate, it is just my audio.
That's
is
perfect.
It sounds perfect. It sounds good. Sounds good to me, mate. But it's
Yeah.
How does it sound to you lads out there?
That's now fine.
Aye, it's just a running problem with me. It's my gremlins are my audio. Aye. So to kick off, lads, Sensum brought up a story that was I found interesting as well. About where here we go.
Well, there's one question before we kick in earnest. There was one question I want to ask the chat. Now, today I got raked out and I had to basically go around the houses because obviously on Monday, allegedly Freedom Day, how free we will be, but Freedom Day on Monday. And yet today, when I was just traveling around the houses and I had to cover quite a fair area in the region today, and all I saw was bloody roadworks everywhere. I mean, every single road. I mean, little sort of rat trap hole roads everywhere, just dug up to hell. Now, colour me simple, colour me stupid. We've had, 16 months of virtually zero traffic on the roads for a bit because of, the sniffle. Why didn't they do the bloody roadworks then? Just as we were about to get ready, loads of bloody roadworks everywhere. Have you lads noticed any of that in your areas?
I haven't noticed any. I've not noticed any around here. It's usually something that they keep for the end of the financial year, and then they spend all their budget, don't they?
Yeah, that's another thing I would disband straight away. That is endemic everywhere. I worked at a big multinational company back in the early 90s. And they did the exact same thing. So as soon as it was getting towards the end of budget season, they'd all piss their money away. And I said, well, why did you ask? Because if we don't spend our budget, we'll get less next year. And I said, well, that's bloody ridiculous. What they should do is do it on a 3-year revision. So let's say you've got a budget every year. Your department's got a budget of 100 grand. If after 1 year you only spend 80, don't knock it down to 80. Give them that 100 grand the following year and then see what happens. Now, if the trend is sort of towards 80, then after 3 years, give them the 80 because that's what they're spending. But if the following year, because the problem is the following year, they might need 120. So even though they only spent 80 1 year, the following year, they needed the extra. So it balances out. So, but the fact that people piss money away on nothing purely to, get rid of budgets so they get the same amount the following year is scandalous. That's and like I say, it's endemic in the private and public sector, and it's just a waste of our money. It's not their money; it's our money.
We need to remind people of that. See, when a lot of people, quite a few people, going about, oh, the government will do this, the government will pay for that, the government will pay for this, and I keep having to remind people that the government doesn't have any money. No, that's our money.
Right,
but you pulled up this from Patrick Vallance. I did see his tweet.
Yes, on I think it was Wednesday of last week. I noticed this report by Dr. Sir Patrick Vallance, who is obviously one of the triumvirate of medical experts that we have covering everything to do with the pandemic. So we have Professor Chris Whitty, Dr. Sir Patrick Vallance, and Dr. Jonathan Van Tam. And here we have the story here, and this is one I've actually spoken about, I think, even before last year, before the end of last year, where because people are being forced to wear masks, and because people are continually hand sanitizing their hands and that, which is something we wouldn't do normally, our systems are not being exposed to the daily pathogens that they normally would have. And the problem is that people think that this, they because you see these pictures of these floating orbs with spikes sticking out them like bloody, the virus at the moment. People out there think you've got these things that are bouncing around like balloons. They're microscopic and they're that small that they'll just pass straight through these bog standard medical masks. That's a fact, because the actual a single virion, which is the virus itself, is 80 nanometers across, whereas the space between the weave in an ordinary mask is 10,000 nanometers across. So that's akin to trying to stop a mosquito with a chain link fence. It's not going to happen.
That's a great analogy. That is, I do use that when I'm talking to people.
Well, and it is, and it is true. Now, the argument then is switched to, like, your Fauci's and that, who's switched more times on masks that he has, like, paid with his switch card at the at the counter of a store. They say, oh yeah, but it'll stop the big droplets. The problem is that the big droplets aren't the problem, because the big droplets essentially fall to the ground. Yes, they can hit surfaces, but those same surfaces, this is what we're exposed to on a daily basis. So the problem is, inside our bodies at any given time, there are trillions of viruses. Yeah, mostly benign. Most of them are completely benign. Unless you're poorly, most of them are completely benign. Yeah. Every breath you take, you expel millions of virions, millions of virus particles. Yeah. Most of them are that small, they'll just pass straight through any form of mask. Yeah. So, that's the case of things. But in ordinary, pre the pandemic, if you like, you'd see people coughing and sneezing and farting, and you'd sat there and you think, well, I hope I don't get that. That sounds a bit rough. And you might get it, you might not. But throughout throughout normal everyday, what was normal everyday life, you know, walking past people, normal contact with people, sitting in pubs, you know, doing the usual things that everybody does, you know, picking up shopping trolleys after somebody, picking up handbaskets after somebody, you're exposed to these pathogens, and your immune system would see these pathogens and you go, yep, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. As soon as you remove that exposure to these pathogens, then your immune system goes, oh, nothing to see, I'll take a bit of a break. And it literally does. It does take a break. And the problem is when you're then re-exposed to these daily pathogens, which is likely to happen when we come out, you know, when allegedly social distance has been removed, but you can just see different parts of the narrative creeping back in, like, oh yeah, you're going to be completely free. Well, apart from, we'd still like you to wear masks. I won't be wearing. I won't be wearing anything or doing anything from this time on, right? The only time I've ever worn a mask is when I've gone into local shops because I don't want them to get wrong. I've never worn a mask in any of the big 5 bloody shopping markets or any crap like that. I haven't had need or want to use public transport, so I've never encountered any crap like that. And the only time I've ever been propositioned, I've just said I am exempt, and in fairness, nobody's ever queried that. I mean, I probably don't look the healthiest person in the world, so they probably just accept it. However, if they were to say, oh, and what's wrong with you? I'll say, well, actually, you're not allowed to ask me that because you're not my GP. And let me just tell you, not all illnesses are visible. And if you want to...
That's it.
Want to progress this further, then that will be discrimination. You see that word discrimination? They fear that word like the fucking plague. You tell anybody, you say this is discrimination. Doesn't matter who you are. They see that word and it's like a red light. Discrimination. Please don't use the discrimination card against me. So
the public they've been trained very well, haven't they? To
exactly. So any form of discrimination. Our turn now. We get to use bloody discrimination.
I've never worn a mask in a shop, and obviously don't intend on.
Now here's the kicker. So we're going to get this this spike in flu cases this year purely because we haven't been naturally exposed to the pathogens that we would have normally done resistance. We would have normally built up resistance to. So we are going to head into a season, you know, especially the winter season, especially when the kids go back to school, where, you know, people will be ill from the flu. Now, they say last year there were very few cases. Now, everything last year was COVID-19, yeah, and they were saying at the time COVID-19, you know, may have actually pushed out, like, you know, through competition may have pushed out the likes of the cold and influenza, or, you know, were those cases repurposed? I don't know. I can't say. I'm not an expert in that case. However, what I do know is that it is possible for somebody to have more than one cold virus at any given time. So why you could have a COVID-19 virus and not have flu at the same time, or not have a common cold at the same time, well, better people than I could probably explain that, but it sounds a bit shit. It's a bit like saying, oh, if you've got COVID-19, you can't catch AIDS, which is just completely utter bollocks, basically. However, what will be the solution? Here's the kicker. Here's the payoff. What's the solution for people potentially could get flu and die? And we do know that the influenza virus across all age groups is more harmful than COVID-19. That's a provable fact. Well, the solution is more lockdowns, and to get everybody even more jabs. Make the flu vaccine, which was recommended for the infirm and elderly, which is it always has been, and optional for everyone else. So now what they want to do is keep on pushing the narrative of lockdowns and vaccinations. Now, 2 years ago, how do we deal with flu in the country? And like I say, the country's always been a bad flu season away from pushing the NHS overboard, you know, with shortages. And those shortages have been artificially manufactured by the influx of people coming into the country. Got nothing to do with resourcing or the various governments cutting budgets. That's never happened since 1948. The NHS was incepted in 1948, and the budget has increased year on year. What's actually happened is, whilst the budget might increase year on year, it's not increasing enough to keep up with the artificial numbers of people who are coming in. That's the reason why the NHS is fucked. So if the likes of Dr. Jonathan Van Tam, Dr. Sir Patrick Vallance, and Professor Chris Whitty actually want to keep on saving the NHS, how's about banjoing out about 5 million people? That'd be a fucking great way to save the NHS. But that's just my opinion. I don't know about you, mate.
Yeah? That sounds spot on. It sounds spot on. The situation we find ourselves in at the moment, the prospectively with these this upcoming season coming ahead of us, is it reminds me of a story from a few years ago about the mother who put sunblock on her child every day of the year. It was around about the time there was a big scare about skin cancer. So she put sunblock on her kid every day of the year, and then the kid got scurvy or rickets you get from lack of vitamin D. That was in the UK, that was. And it's the same with this sterilising your hands every 2 minutes. The natural bugs that you're supposed to pick up, like you say, that it makes your immune system strong. They've not been there for the last, year and a half. So there could be, like they say, a surge in deaths in that, or a surge in cases relating to that. But then you don't know if it's that or it's this experiment that they're giving everybody. Maybe that is that drives the numbers up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, like I say, it drives the numbers up, and like I say, what we've actually done, because the government, and it wasn't just us, it was most of the wider Anglosphere, in fairness, fell for the scandalous propagandized videos coming out of China in sort of early January, February of last year, where you saw people sort of walking and all of a sudden standing bolt upright and falling flat on their face. Never fucking happened. It was just a psyop. And welding people into the doors. The idiot in Parliament, the idiots in the advisory board are saying, "Oh, look at that! They're having to do this. Oh, this must be really bad." They didn't think for one moment that this could be some form of mechanism to get the rest of the world to behave just like China, so that China got a free pass on its social credit score system, because this is where it's going to end up. This is why it's driving to all these things. So now we've gone through this hell, of lockdowns and basically pushing people apart from one another, removing the ability to have conversations, semi-private in pubs and whatnot, social gatherings, etc. Oh, we have to clamp down on that. And the Canadian government admitted it last week, because they said, "Oh, the reason why I want to stop them and make them illegal is because people tend to spread misinformation." Listen, one person's misinformation is another person's gold. That's just in your opinion. And if you want to argue,
this term misinformation, that's the thing. That's a communist term, that is, to be honest. But it doesn't mean that it's false information. It just means it's information that you shouldn't be hearing.
Exactly, and considering the censorship on the media, and like I say, there are many forms of censorship takes, and one of them is sort of basically telling a half truth, so telling you half the story but not telling you the complete picture or the context that it was in. And the other one is that they'll tell you the actual factual information, but what they're not telling you is the scope. So when they're talking about things about reporting reactions to the treatment, shall we say, they'll say, "Oh yes, but it's so safe across the board." It's like, it's so safe, but it is, because in this country, I think there's 50 million people or more have now had at least one jab, and when you take the 50 million as a whole compared to the adverse reaction list, it is. It's not insignificant, but it's small. It's very, it's small. And the efficacy of these treatments do seem to help the target people who it was meant to. So in other words, the infirm and the elderly, whose immune systems are generally weakened or compromised anyway. However, that's a very disingenuous number, because they're saying, look, there's 50 million people there and there's only this number here. But if you break it down into age category, based on how likely is this person to become severely ill and or die, across all of the age ranges, and then you look at those same age brackets, and I mean, the younger people now are only just starting to get these things with regards to adverse affection. It's, the risk of harm from one of those things, virus, versus the risk of harm from the treatment, there's not a lot in it. It's getting sort of 50-50, but but for my money, that should be everybody's decision. It's your decision. You should not be press ganged or some false, false mandate. In other words, oh, well, you don't have to have the vaccine, but you can't work unless you do, which is basically saying you have to have the mandate. Because the only people, the vaccine, because the only people who could afford to do that are already minted and, don't have to work anyway. Certain sectors like, oh, you can't work here unless that, and you can't do this and can't do this and they can't do that. Well, this is destroyed, and everybody, can see that this has destroyed the whole nature of our country. And the people have lapped it up like the sheep that they are, unfortunately, apart from, a lot of people who operate in our circles. They're going to go down this path. And because they've been softened up with this one, as soon as somebody farts in the wrong key and they say, oh, that's flu, or flu's a lot worse than the other thing we've just had, we must lock down. It's like, no, we've never locked down for flu before. Well, we need to protect the NHS. You've always been a bad flu season away from the NHS being knackered because there's too many bloody people here. Why is that? Our birth rates are through the floor. We should be able to have one bed per ward nowadays, but we haven't. We're in there like sardines with everybody from around the world. Why is that? That's the reason why your NHS is knackered. So that was just one of the stories that I noticed this time around, mate. And I just thought it was worth mentioning, because they're going to use the same narrative, same project fear, the same solution, and the same sort of transfer of wealth from public to private sector in the form of ramping up, total vaccination across the populace again for this one. It's just absolute and utter madness.
Yeah, no, you are spot on there when you say as well. It's the president now by locking people down for this. So, like you say, the flu is deadlier, so that means we'll need a lockdown for the flu. Sorry if I'm roboting. I don't know if we must have this video, mate.
You're okay now, but a couple of seconds ago you were roboting again. I've no idea.
I think it's because I'm trying to share screen, I think, pal. There we go. You see that? Let's get that here. Oops. Sorry. Let's try out this video, but I don't know why it's not doing it. How does it do it? I'm afraid. I don't know, it's one of the shots. Just like the other ones, and they're explaining how death would be from the Delta variant. Sky News. Did you see that one at all?
You were really bad there, mate. I'm sorry to say.
Because I'm trying to share. I'm trying to share footage.
So what was the story, mate?
It's on Sky News. This is a screenshot I've taken. So out of the 400 odd people that's died from the Delta variant, is it? 92 were unvaccinated, where 118 were fully vaccinated. And
but that proves it's working.
Well, what the guy said is a real cope. So what he says is it's good, but it's not perfect. And that's literally what he said in that video clip. I would play it, but it's not playing the white man, unfortunately.
No, is that fella in the background had his jab? Looks like he's got his arm up ready.
He's showing you what arm he put his vaccination on.
Yeah,
that's the arm he got his jab in.
Oh yeah, it's now stuck like that for the rest of life. That was just one of those well, it's not perfect.
It's unfortunate because every time I try to share a screen, I turn into Metal Mickey. Yeah, that's better. So I was wanting to play a video of John Voight talking to Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
On Tucker Carlson today, but I can't get this up without turning into Metal Mickey.
We'll see if you can get the video playing, and then once it's played, come back in. So let's see if that helps, if that works.
Okay. We struggle.
Yep. Well, here we go. Can't hear any audio of the clip, but when you share it, do you need to share sound or something?
I don't know why there is no sound on that, mate.
Yeah, because when you open up, like it says you want to share your screen, it usually says, do you want to share sound as well? Share audio, sorry.
Yeah, that's... Let's try again. Share screen. Oh, got it, sorry, mate. Oh, mate. Yeah, share screen. You know, I'm having to learn this way. Share audio. Thank you. Well, learn something new every day, mate.
Yep. There we go.
And what that's meant to him in his life was not something we expected to talk about at all.
Yep, can you hear that?
The most famous actors in Hollywood, has been famous for more than 50 years, and he's a conservative, aren't a ton, so we decided we'd talk to him about what it's like to be conservative in Hollywood. And that conversation lasted about a minute, and then it turned into the direction of him and his faith. And what that's meant to him in his life was not something we expected to talk about at all, but we're glad we did. The full conversation on Tucker Carlson.
I was really suffering for many reasons. My career was a little bit in flux at that time, and lots of things were going on. My relationship to my kids and wife and stuff. And I was on the floor. I found myself on the floor saying, "It's so difficult. It's so difficult." I said it out loud. And I heard in my ear, it's supposed to be difficult. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Like a separate voice telling you
Yes.
that.
It's supposed to be difficult. A voice of
I thought that was brilliant. What you said there.
Yeah, you probably need to unshare that screen now and go back to CheaperNet, what you were using before. 'Cause then your your audio is fine. But yes, I did actually see that through the week. I think it was Friday morning when I saw that, and yeah, that's the eternal struggle, isn't it? You know, I mean, you got John Voight there, Oscar winner, or at least an Oscar nominated actor, and I think for me, his marquee performance was, I mean, he's brilliant in Ray Donovan, but for me, his marquee performance was Runaway Train with Eric Roberts and Rebecca De Mornay. He was nominated for it. It wasn't a particularly brilliant film, but he was absolutely stunning in that role, Runaway Train. It was a marquee acting performance, and I was surprised he didn't actually win the Oscar for that one. But there you've got a bloke, he's minted, you know, he's made dozens of successful films and television series. He has struggled with his own demons, as I think he intimated there. And when he was at a low ebb, you know, he reckoned he's on the floor, prostrate on the floor, you know, thinking to himself, why is everything so hard? And this is a multimillionaire. So, you know, and he reckoned, you know, the old voice there goes, why is everything so hard? And the voice was, it's meant to be. You know, that is the eternal struggle. You know, life.
I thought I was very powerful.
Yeah, life isn't always a box of chocolates, as the old Forrest Gump says. You know, we all have our own trials, and we all have our own tribulations, and we all have periods in our lives where we have to face some form of adversity, whether that's a tragedy or whether it's losing a job or anything like that. And you know, these are really hard-hitting things, and I genuinely feel sorry for when I see, you know, established businesses like Debenhams that have thousands and thousands of staff who, through no fault of their own, are now, you know, basically unemployed. And for me, that is the reason why we have a welfare system, as a safety blanket for those people until they can pick themselves up and get into another role. It's not meant to be there as a way of life, which is how it's being abused now. But
Yeah,
for
it's a lifestyle now, isn't it?
Yes.
Benefit.
So yes. So for me, you know, we all go through, like I say, you know, I personally, and I'm not going to chub on about them because I just see there's no point. You know, I've been through shit that melts steel, and it's not me personally that's been through it. It's just, you know, family members and whatnot, you know, dying the way they die and all that lot. You know what I mean? No such thing as a quick and easy way to go in my family. So, you know, this kind of stuff, it plays on your mind. What do? You can fold up, you know, you can go very fold up in your own little world and, you know, really become introverted and suffer the consequences of that. Or you literally, you know, you take it on the chin. And I'm a take it on the chin kind of bloke. You know, we can't control. Nobody, you know, I mean, look at matey boy who run Apple. Yeah. You know, the multi-billionaire, Steve Jobs. Yeah. His number, he couldn't avoid it. You know, it was, you know, his writing was on the wall. He couldn't sidestep all that caper. You know, so, you know, the way things are, you either do that. But I think the way that, you know, I mean, what John Voight is describing there is he was a very low place mentally. He was, you know, it sounds like depression and that, but he got a spark of what he believes was, you know, divine inspiration to pick himself up and sod off and go and do better, or to accept, you know, yeah, you're going to feel like this at times, matey boy. And he come out of the other end of that far stronger than he went into it. But all I see now on you know, social media has been, and I don't like to use this word lightly, a cancer on people's mental health, because everybody wants to, as soon as there's a most minor or trivial of issues, oh, my salmon mousse didn't set properly, teary eyes, you know, these things get blown out of all proportion, and then they'll get a million responses. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh God, you must be so devastated. I'm like, are you for fucking real? You know, I know people who's lost kids and shit like that, and you're crying about a bit of fucking salmon mousse or some other shite on there, and it belittles, because, you know, there are people who suffer very, very tragically from stress and mental disorders, you know, and a lot of our you know, our servicemen and that, you know, do come, especially if they've been in desperate conflict, come back damaged, and we don't help them. We don't help them at all, and everybody is a victim now. So you've got you know, Sheila there, whose nails job didn't go perfect for a wedding, and she was absolutely devastated, and, you know, she was crying in her pillow for 2 weeks on an end. You got another lad there, lost an arm and 2 legs. Yeah, I've got a bit of PTSD. You know, how and yet you'll see the victim status rallying in and go, oh, you must be so gutted. I'm so sorry. You should sue that company who didn't do your nails and all that. And it's almost like the same kind of heart and outpouring as this poor bugger here. I mean, I was watching one on the golf that's been on recently, and they always try and do quite a bit with disabled golfers, because that's a big thing, you know, disabled golfers, and believe it or not, blind golf. Now I can see, but when I play, it's almost like I am playing blind golf. But you got these guys out there, you know, they have people who position them and that they play golf, and golf is a great way of bringing people back. You know, helps them out in, you know, helps their mental, you know, their mental well-being, because they think they've got nothing to live for. And I'll tell you something now, the game of golf is one of the most addictive things you'll ever play. So these guys who are probably focusing on, you know, oh, woe is me, and, you know, this is how I've ended up, and this is it, and this is that. You stick a 7-iron in their hands, and they can hit a few balls, because even with, like I say, you've got guys out there who are nearly off scratch golfers who've got 2 amputated legs. You know, these guys can, and it's basically, it saved them. But then, you know, everybody, you know, because of this victimhood mentality of social media, where your kudos in society is based on how many victimhood points you can amass on any given time, John Voight's words coming out there will just be lost in, it'd be like lost like a fart in the wind. Because
yeah, and I think that's what's missing. What's missing is the trials and tribulations that build character, and you don't see a lot of character around these days. And I put that personally down to everybody wants this cushy life, and you want to give your kids a cushy life. You want to give them the things that you didn't have, but it's the trials and tribulations of being poor, or, you know, being, you know, the bottom of the rung, coming from Glasgow, you know, etc., whatever your particular predicament's been. When you forge through that, it builds you. It builds you up, and you're better for it once you've been through it. And I think that's sorely missing, character, these days, no, because it puts it in perspective, like you say. It's, you know, you're not really bothered if your souffle or whatever it is doesn't rise in the oven, because it's meaningless, no, because you've had past experience with actual problems and you've got through them, so you can, you know, put these things, you can prioritize these things, and some things just aren't a problem, are they?
Prior to social media being an outlet, people did bottle up their feelings, and that can be just as bad as just continually gushing out shite for no good reason. There's got to be a happy medium, you know. You know, people, but there's no. The thing I find is that there's no sort of self-throttling or self-limiting thing on people. You know, everything's either the worst thing in the world ever, or meh. You know, I don't care. You see what I mean? So and you just see it in the the YouTube channels that have millions and millions of followers. They are some of the most vapid individuals ever. And like you'll see one bloke, yes, oh God, I've got to show you this, I've got to show you this. And he'll bring out a bloody original Luke Skywalker in the box from the original 1977 Star Wars. Yeah, I just got this. Look at this. This is great. Now this to him is like a big thing, and you've got all these. Oh wow, this is brilliant. And then the same bugger 3 weeks later will say, "Oh, I snapped a piece off me Castle Grayskull." From I'm so gutted. I'm in a state of depression. It's like, come on, sunshine, really? You don't know. And this is because society has become softer and softer and more mollycoddled. And when John Voight's talking about his tribulations, his sort of dark periods, this was long before the likes of social media, because he was going through a dry spell in his career. He was hitting the bottle. I don't know about anything stronger than booze, but that sort of little shake up, it's meant to be, that little voice in his ear, it's meant to be hard, shook him up. And then he's been doing great things, strength to strength since then. So he had a fantastic period sort of in the 70s and into the early 80s, a little bit of a dry spell, and he's come back stronger than ever. But without that sort of that little shake up, that little kick in the backside, it's meant to be hard. He probably would have continued to feel like a bit of a victim and not done anything about it. And that's the problem. You can either feel like a victim, or you can rise above it, power through it, and come out stronger on the other side.
I take it as a challenge. Just to keep it lighter. And I don't know if I'm going to robot again, lads, but did you see this? I sent you a link to this. That Cuba's cured reason. We're done to Cuba for good reason.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to introduce the clip before you actually start fiddling.
Not a clip.
So
it's not. Wasn't a clip. It was a piece. So
yeah,
it's a piece.
Because when you switched to bring it on, you went robot-y again.
Sorry about that. Well, it is an actual piece to read.
All right.
It's from the Post-Millennial. It's the leader of the 1619 projects declared that about the 1619 project.
Yes.
For the folks in the chat, this is the people who are trying to rewrite American history. And it's very Afrocentric. It's all based around when Africans landed in America. They reckon that's when America became America, not actually when America became America in 1776. Or was that just the independence? Or whatever year they became a country. But yeah, she says that it's least inequal. What is it? Cuba has the least inequality, and that's largely due to socialism. So yeah, that's because when everybody starves just as equal. So that was quite entertaining from.
Yeah, well,
these people who can't help but cry everybody's a racist, but communists aren't racists for some reason. So
no, well, like I say, these 1690 people want to rewrite history in their own image. To say something of that nature, to say, "Oh, communism eradicates racism," no, it doesn't. Well, not especially. What communism does is, if you've got the lowest denominator in society, that's the highest you'll ever achieve under communism. That's basically it. Equality isn't people being raised up to the highs. It's people being pushed down to the if you've got a span of people from a low of 40 to a high of 80, everybody doesn't get dragged up to the 80. Everybody gets pushed down to the 40, apart from the people pulling the strings. So basically, it's yet more of a nod towards globalist feudalism for the elite and the wealthy, so they become our overlords, and communism for the masses. Basically, that's what they're pushing for. That's what the globalists are hoping for. And like I say, you look at Cuba. Oh, there's no racism in Cuba. Yeah, Cuba's a basket case. Yeah, you're going to look at what you're going to do. Look at Venezuela next, because Cuba's communist, so Venezuela's socialist. Yeah, so that's doing so well, this pure socialist experiment in Venezuela. So basically, what she's saying is, won't it be great if society is completely ballsed over because of anti-racism? Well, no, it isn't, because when a society fails as desperately as Cuba or as Venezuela, absolutely everybody outside of the elites suffer equally. And if that's the kind of equality you want, then I don't want any part of it. And you can go and rewrite your history in somebody else's country, because I'm not listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I just found it remarkable that they can openly advocate to edit history. I thought that straight away you would call that out as some kind of Orwellian nightmare. I hope that audio's better. Chance I've stopped sharing. Yeah, that's completely, that's exactly the word for Orwellian. Rewriting the past to alter the future. That's what they're doing.
And it's more insidious than that, because now what they're trying to do is, if you question that, they want to make the actual questioning of it illegal, just in the same way as the government are trying to push through bills to make activism illegal, in as much that they want to make people protesting illegal. We've gone through 16 months of hell. People are now going down. You'll never see this on the mainstream media. People going down in their millions to London to walk through the streets. So far so that the head of the protest is almost caught up with the tail of the protest, because there's that many people there. In excess of 1 million people. We're seeing the same in France. We're seeing the same in Ireland now. Ireland are now finally growing a pair and are starting to say, this is bollocks. Has anybody seen on the television, has anybody seen outside of reports on YouTube, on the various channels like Paul Joseph Watson and Rebel Media and the likes? Yeah, the old, the sort of the, lightweight sort of media, as it were, or the accepted sort of protest media. They'll show these things, and yet none of the mainstream, because it doesn't suit their narrative. They don't want people to think, because, like I say, for every one of those people down in London, we're 65 or 67 million strong, and even though there's 1 million went down there, probably, let's say 1 million attended, we might have 5 million who know about it. But we still got 60 million who are completely unaware, who still get spoon-fed the porridge of shite that comes out of the BBC, Sky, and Channel 4, etc., and the Groany ad, and they're still thinking, and the thing is, the only time you ever see the BBC mention it is when they want to try and portray it as like a super spreader event, or there'll be a group of people. The protest will be long gone. It'll be hours after the protest, and they'll be just sat in a park playing a bit of music, and then once the people have thinned out and they've got a crowd of, say, 15 or 20 people, the Rozzers will come in, kettle them, and then all of a sudden they'll get pushback, and they'll turn around and say, "Oh, look at these, violent protests erupt in London because of the pandemic." No. The protest was 8 hours beforehand, and you should have been filming that. What happened later on was the police trying to assert themselves on a bunch of people who were doing absolutely nothing wrong, but they just wanted to get a bit of, clickbait for the mainstream media to portray everybody in a bad light. You know what I mean? So it's just completely and utterly wrong. Vandalizing a statue, 10 years in jail. Yeah, well, they should have a word with that youth who was stood on the cenotaph trying to burn the Union Jack. Yeah,
Oh,
You
yeah,
know what I mean?
there's plenty of people who have committed these crimes who will never ever be even questioned about these things.
Because that
Nothing.
was the right kind of protest, because it fulfilled the monsters narrative, because they were for the right reasons. They weren't super spreader events. You know, they were mostly peaceful, those lootings, burnings and riotings that we had in the aftermath of some bugger in America dying. You know, we had to suffer that fate, but fortunately it's not been anywhere near in the same sort of thing that the states have suffered. And
How do they take themselves seriously, though? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because these
Well,
people, it's like they're state sanctioned, like you say, state sanctioned protests.
it's state-sanctioned protest, and the thing is, you know, these groups, the legs of the monster, as I call it, a lot of times the people who are the people at the top of these groups know exactly what they're doing and who they're working for, yeah. But the sort of the soldiers, the foot soldiers, if you like, of Antifa, BLM, Extinction Rebellion, all of these numpty groups, they think they're actually sticking it to the man. You know, and you know, we're the oppressed, we're sticking it to the man. And it haven't worked out yet that every single door is being held wide open for them. You know, they're not being pushed back against. You know, the Rosas there with the old Billy Club, one upside the head for being a COVID, like a lockdown protester, I should say. That same Gadji, you know, 3 months before was probably on his knees crying and hugging, you know, grabbing the leg of a poor Bama who must have suffered some kind of mock oppression on the victim, you know, the totem pole of victimhood. So you got Matey Boy here just about to give somebody one upside the head with his expandable truncheon. Same bloke would have been crying in a pool of tears on the floor, or doing a bloody what's that dance called? And his bloody rainbow flag when it was the Pride Parade and stuff like that. They weren't super spreader events. They're just normal. They're accepted because, you know what I mean?
Yeah, these are the kind of guys that would be
twerking. Yeah, he'll have been twerking with his little, you know, rainbow armbands, and the crowd's going mad because isn't he so inclusive in thing? But you know, you rock up saying that and just say I don't agree with these lockdowns, matey, but bam, straight up the side of the head, into the fucking back of the van and into prison.
Or resisting the lies is pulling you up for saying gadget there. Ooh, don't know, is that cultural appropriation? Your words.
Gadji? Or is it
Gadji.
Southern thing? Is that a Southern thing?
Scottish thing.
Is it?
Gadget. Aye, they say
I've always used it. I used to go, well, like I say, when I was young, I used to spend a bit of time up with my in-laws up in Paisley in Scotland. So I don't know if that's where I copped for that one. But
no, it's not a Scotland. It's not a Glasgow. I don't think it's a Glasgow thing, mate. Don't say where I'm from.
Well, that's what I mean. I've heard it down south. I hear people talk, like, you know, Milton Keynes and below. They say Gadji. So I've put up there. But like I say, I'm a bloody an all sorts. Me, I'm an all sorts because I'm from I've worked all over the country, and most of my family are from various bits and parts of the country. So I'm a sort of an ethno mutt. I'm ethnically mutt of all of the different different groups that.
Proper Brit then. Resisting the lies saying we Chuchters say Gudgie, but the wee Perth boys say Gadgie. See, Gadgie is something that I've heard in Glasgow, actually. Gadgie. Call somebody a Gadgie, they're like a midget raker, or a bin raker, a Gadgie, a tramp, a traveller, something like that. There's sorry, just on screen, there's that from the 1960 project. At least inequality. That's because everybody's equal.
Yeah, it's the least inequality because it's shit. You know, is that what you're going to say to that wifey? Like I say, I would love to have 5 minutes with these people who come up with these scurrilous bloody comments and say, yeah, Cuba's the least racist thing because it has the most equality because of communism. Yeah, okay, love. Would you want to live there? You live in America or wherever it is. in your, probably decent accommodation. That tell you what, if it's that good, you first go and sod off to Cuba for a bit and see how that works out for you. If everybody's the same, because I can imagine that you'd be looking for the next bloody windsurfer to get back over to Florida as soon as possible. Because it's, and I'm not belittling the Cuban people, because, they just have to put up with what they've been given. One thing that Cuba is good for, and one of the very few things, is literacy. I think Cuba's got one of the highest literacy rates of any nation in the world. And it's also got a reasonable healthcare service, nationalized healthcare service. But then again, you haven't got millions of bloody people wanting to get into Cuba. You've got millions wanting to get out. So they've probably got resources coming out of the nose. And the hell of it is, I saw a program where there were people in America who weren't particularly well off, but needed fairly trivial medical procedures, you would say, but they weren't covered on their insurance programs. And they couldn't afford to pay for these things privately in America. So they were flying over to Cuba, because obviously the restrictions had been lifted on flying over to Cuba under Obama. So they flying over to Cuba, paid private in Cuba because it was a peppercorn's worth of money in comparison to the cost in the States, getting unbelievable treatment and then flying back to the States. So, Cuba does do some things right, but on the whole, your standard of life is shit. You'd probably be very well read, but you won't be able to do anything with that knowledge because your country's shit. That's basically the end of it.
It's just insane. Just saying that about Cuba, of all places. I'll share this with you. I seen this and I definitely didn't fact check it because it's just hilarious. Where is my going? There we go. Back again. I seen this tweet. I wasn't fact check it, but I thought it was that funny that I would bother. I would just pass on this information, not knowing if it's true or not, but it definitely deserves to have a quick look. Where's it gone? Where the hell's man? Sorry, I've lost my Telegram. Come back. There we go. So I wasn't playing the right man now. Can you make that out, folks?
Yeah, that's me. Where'd you get the picture of me from? Because Resisting the Lies just called me out. Shit, I didn't know the camera was on, mate.
I thought you had a kind of funny.
Camera was on. Oh, God, I hope Ricky Doolan isn't in the chat. He'll tell me to go back there.
Yeah, I seen this and I just thought that was glorious. Today we celebrate 4th-year veteran officer Cheng Ji. He was family of 5 Sudanese trespassers. Bad people. Stealing fruit from the Chinese farm. Yeah. It's a Cheng in the chat. Oh, just for a moment. Yes, I need to get back to figuring out fix this man. Yeah, so. Is there anything else you've seen this week?
Well, I hadn't seen that story there. Was that actually in China though?
Oh, aye. This is well.
Yeah, because I was going to say there'll be, he'll be lauded as a hero.
Aye, still from a Chinese farm, aye. Aye.
But if that same thing was to happen here or anywhere else in this sort of the wider Anglosphere and associated countries, that bloke would be in prison by now. He'd be facing multiple counts of, even though he's doing the right thing, protecting property rights, etc. And it would be world news for months on end, just as we got with St. George. But because, he's a native in his own country, they actually have in-group preference for the natives of their country, which I completely agree with. If I was in China, I would be considered a Guailo, which basically means a foreigner. And you know, I'd be more than tolerated and I'd be able to work there. They wouldn't have any problem with that. But on matters of state and on matters of funding and on matters of who gets what first, the Chinese people come first. I completely agree with that. Who wouldn't? Of course, if you flip it over to anywhere in the Anglosphere and that was to happen, it's the complete opposite. It's you know, the world's gone mad. And the thing is, excuse me, quite a lot of people who've been indoctrinated in this sort of mantra of self-hatred, which has been pushed on us, we know why and what for, to cause these kind of divisions. They'd be put up in arms alongside, you know, the Bain contingent saying, oh, yeah, I agree with you. Oh, this is desperate. Yeah, lock him up, throw away the key. Can we not bring back the death penalty for this person? You know, that's not, I mean, we saw that when, what was it? Somebody mentioned a tweet the other day and somebody posted underneath it, bring back the death penalty. And it was some of the most innocuous thing. But this is how far people have been brainwashed into hating absolutely everything about their history, culture, country, and the people therein, which includes themselves. You know, it's just extraordinary. You know, the same thing. It was when that bloke who thieves broke into his house and he shotgunned one of them. I think they were travellers, and he shotgunned one of them. The amount of pearl clutching and hand wringing that went on. You know, these people were known felons. They had a criminal record so long. If you wanted to listen to it, it was on an LP. And yet, defended his property. He eventually got thrown out of court, but he went through hell for like 18 months. Can't remember the bloke's name, but he went through hell for 18 months. Now, if society, if that was the 1950s, he'd be held up as a hero, defending his own rights, property rights, because he rang the police and told them what was going on. Oh yeah, we'll get round to it. You know what I mean? It was like, so what do you do in those things? And like I say, you're still allowed to own a shotgun because, like I say, he was a farmer or he was something like that.
Yeah, he was a farmer. Yeah, it was Martin's.
And so, people breaking into his house, known wrong-uns, boof, bit of buckshot in one of them, dies. But he wasn't, it wasn't like he went out of his house, got in his car, drove 1,000,000 miles to where these people live, rocked up and said, right, I'm going to shoot you. No, he was actually defending his life and his property. And yet he was the one who was the bad bugger. And, all of the outcry and the outfall. I mean, the only, I'm saying this semi sort of sarcastically, his only saving grace was that it was traveller people. Because had it been one of the Boehmers, he'd still be in prison now. He wouldn't look at daylight again, because that would be the narrative that was pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. Just David got that in the chat there, Tony Martin. Yeah, and it was
absolutely yes.
That's it. That did happen like 2 years ago. Is it more recently that some guy broke into a house and in the process ended up getting killed, and they actually put a shrine. They started to build a shrine outside that person's house to the guy who'd been the criminal.
I think that was the one, wasn't it?
Because that was another one. That is another time it happened, because that was Tony Martin. That was quite a few years ago. This was just a couple of years ago, and they started to put shrines, and people would go along. Some folk, fair play to them, they went along and tore away the flowers and that. But the absolute cheek of it, you know what I mean? Bold as brass, that is. There's no. That was down my road. Aye. But yeah, they see it like it's their right to take whatever they want because they want it, and you've got it. And that's they see that as an absolute right. It's an American. It was in America. And it was a black woman being interviewed about. I think it was her son had been killed during a robbery, and she was saying, "Well, God, it was no. I mean, it was the way she was making it out was it was just at work. You know what I mean? Just robbing people. You didn't need to kill them."
I would just like to say, I would just like to let I would like, everybody, well, I would imagine that everybody would know this, yeah? Look at what happened with Geordie Boy over in the States there, Geordie Floyd there, yeah? And what happened in the aftermath of that, all the pearl clutching, the hand wringing, the demonization of the police, the then immediate defunding of the police, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll give you a name, Raoul Moat. Remember him? Held people hostage, and he was another wrong one. Deserved exactly what he got. But the narrative after that one then was basically, Raoul Moat was this evil white person. The police did absolutely wrong. We need to make sure all these police get medals and this specialist train, even more of them get armed train. It was a complete opposite of the fallout that came from the George Floyd narrative. The complete opposite. More police, more weapons. We need to keep our citizens safe. We want, people to be on standby. However, as soon as that standby is somebody stabbing shit out of people on London Bridge who has to get attacked with a fire extinguisher and an narwhal tusk, the police were dead wrong to pump him with 20 fucking bullets because he had a fake bloody bomb pack on. Police didn't know that, though. They didn't know it was fake, did they? At 20 yards, can you tell it's fake or not? I couldn't. So what were they supposed to do? Sort of like, sit there and go, bang, it's too late, you're dead. And so are 80 other people that you could have saved by taking the exact action that you should have done and did do and got pilloried for it after it. Do you see what I mean? This is why it's so obnoxious, this whole narrative posting thing, because and it's the same thing with, and if everybody, I hope everybody's seen Urba Derba's latest video, Silent Screams. Forbidden Recalls actually posted it onto his channel on YouTube, but it's also available on Urba Derba's channel on Odyssey. You watch that and you look at the pictures there, and you look at the chalk and cheese reactions to how one set of lives, because only one, we know only one set of lives matter if you look at the phraseology, but you just look at how differently those losses of lives at the hands of others are completely ignored, suppressed, nothing to see here, and yet you get a known criminal, an evil person who held a gun to a pregnant lady's stomach, all of a sudden becomes, the saint of all nations around the world, up to and including our country. It's just utterly unbelievable. You got people, children, they've never caused any harm or injustice to any harm or injustice to anybody in their lives yet. They're not old enough to have done that, and yet they've been needlessly murdered, and yet nobody cares. I say nobody cares. We care, and the people in the know care, but you never see it reported on mainstream media. If it is, it's probably just a tagline and then becomes a byline on page 20 4 weeks later. It's sickening and it's repulsive, because if you're going to call out unfairness and injustice and needless deaths, then fine, do it, but do it fairly across all demographics. Don't just single out one demographic as being oppressed more than another, when we know statistically that just isn't the case. It's quite the reverse.
Yeah, I think that particularly rubs Europeans the wrong way. Because for a long time, for a few years, I've been trying to bring back this play the white man. You know what I mean? Because that does mean something. You know what I mean? It means play fair. You know what I mean? Play the white man, and we do have a certain, what we call it, ethic, but an expectation that we would be treated fair. Especially if we're wanting to treat people fairly. But to go back to St. George, did you see this? I don't know if you can make that out on my screen. There was a lightning strike to cut the mural.
Well, and the thing of it was, they immediately wanted to phrase it as being an explosive attack. And had they not had the CCTV footage of the strike actually hitting the building, that's what the mainstream media would have pushed. They would have said this was wanton destruction of our St. George. And somebody said, actually, no, it was hit by lightning. I've got the video. Oh, fuck, we can't use that. You know, it was like the abject disappointment of it being a naturally occurring lightning strike. However, you could look at it in the John Voight sense. Is this a message? You know, because it's God saying, yeah, if you think that fucker's up here, you've got something coming. He's cooking downstairs. You know what I mean?
That's that. You took the words right out of my mouth. This is surely it's an act of God. And it's the first thing that came to my mind when I seen this is that's something's being said there, and no man had to go near it for it to be said. But yeah, they crafted that. No,
Yeah,
the bad white guy that done it. Maybe it just goes to show that God's a white man.
No, well, like I say, you know, you've got the story there of John Voight saying, you know, and it's meant to be difficult. It's meant to be difficult. Boom! It was like a lightning strike, and there we have an actual provable lightning strike. You know, and like I say, literally, when the damage and destruction was initially started, it's like, oh, this somebody's destroyed this on purpose. This is, you know, and I think, you know, a day later or several hours later, we know how it was because of the thunderstorm light. We've got the image of the strike that caused the damage. But then there's no narrative on that that's saying like, oh, is this, you know, because well, put it this way, if something had happened of an unnatural disposition and all of a sudden, you know, the bottom, you know, the bottom two rungs, there'd been like a shaft of light had come out of the clouds and shone straight directly on the image of St. George. The media would have been pushing this like to bugger, you see, oh, this is God's way of telling everybody that, you know, this is all right and this is that. When it gets blown to front, it's like, yeah, we're not interested. It's just a natural thing, you know. It's a shame. We'll rebuild it. Don't worry, it'll be back up. Wouldn't it be funny if the same thing happened again, though, if lightning did strike twice? That would be quite telling. It would be quite appropriate as well, because, like I say, given that bloke's record, I don't reckon he's upstairs with the boy. I reckon he's downstairs, cooking barbecue. I think he's got a nice place downstairs.
Oh yeah, he's definitely got a date with destiny. That's yeah, he isn't going anywhere except for south. South. Alright, that's a story that I'm not ready for it at the moment, but I did share it on my Telegram channel about Jackie Chan. Did you see Jackie Chan's craving to become a communist?
Yes, I did. You know, well, it's you know, the thing is, he knows which side his bread's buttered, doesn't he? Because prior to the CPC effectively becoming a capitalist communist state, so communist with regards to the control of people, but capitalist with regards to trade. And also, if you look at the money that's being pushed into the film industry coming out of the CPC, they are funding most of the big projects now. They are funding lots of different film adaptations and, you know, these superhero films, blah blah blah, on the proviso that nothing bad can be said about them or their sort of internal regime. So this is just a bit of I'd like a bit more work, please, China, from Jackie Chan. There's nothing, you know. I don't believe for one moment there's any what's the word I'm looking for? Fealty towards China involved. I think it's just basically feathering his nest. You know, I think he's doing a cap in hand one, because obviously, you know, the film roles are not as profligate as they used to be. I mean, he's getting on now. I mean, he's still as fit as a chip for a bloke his age. But I think, you know, the last few films he's been in, he was in one with Pierce Brosnan, which was The Foreigner, which I think was a Netflix-based film. Prior to that, the last one I remember him being in was the horrific remake of The Karate Kid, even though it was Kung Fu and it was set in China, with Will Smith's lad in it, with Jackie Chan playing the role of like a Mr. Miyagi type figure. And that was funded. That was filmed and funded pretty much in China. So I think he's basically making sure that he's his brownie points, his social credit brownie points are there. So they'll say, "Oh yeah, we need Jackie Chan in this movie because he thinks we're great," sort of thing. Which the reality of that, I think, is just a bit of a virtue signal to keep him relevant in the film industry. I don't dislike Jackie Chan, by the way, but
yeah, no, I did see that that remake, the Karate Kid remake. I watched like half an hour of it, and then I had to switch it off. It was dire. But like you're saying, with regards to Jackie Chan, that's opening up a nice big market for him to get his products into, isn't it? But it was the sampling for the CPC that just I couldn't believe it. But wasn't it based? No.
Well, that's just proving
You've
his
got
fealty,
Farmer.
isn't it? That's what he's saying. Well, like you say, if you look at Jackie Chan, even in the 80s, was making films that were worldwide successes because he was in. It was a vehicle for Nissan. They paid for, the Cannonball Run. And I think he was in with the gadget who played Jaws, a fella called Richard Keel, the big tall bloke who played Jaws in the Bond movies.
Oh, aye.
And it was Jackie Chan and Richard Keel, I think, was in Cannonball Run too. And they're in this souped up hyper technology car that was taking on all of the, your V8s in America and whatnot. And, so he's been quite relevant. He's made some, massive films, both for the Hong Kong Chinese market, which also includes Japan and South Korea. And they travel around the world. I mean, some of them are dubbed, some of them are actually in English. Like I say, the film The Foreigner, that wasn't actually a bad film. I saw that myself, the one with Pierce Brosnan in. Once again, it's just your bog standard sort of, what's it called, like, your Liam Neeson type film. What was that series of films called where he said, I've picked up certain skills. What was that called again? The Foreigner was a similar version, except it was Jackie Chan rather than Liam Neeson in the main protagonist's role. Taken, that was it. Yeah. So it was like a bit of a riff on the Taken sort of storyline. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen much of Jackie Chan in a while, and like I say, it's just a paid promotion to make sure he gets included on up and coming projects in the future. I'm sure. I don't think he might become a CPC member in name only, but they won't restrict him or bound him over in the same way that they do the ordinary people of China. That's for sure.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I had an article actually from the Independent. I can't look for it. I can't see if I find it. It was from Enver Solomon, of all people. It was about the Home Office not turning its back on refugees. Obviously, it wasn't refugees that we're talking about. It was. I can see if I can find it. Sorry. It's gone. Yeah, I can't find that. I will just put up a reminder to everybody of the people we need to be worshipping now. These are the saints. Tomorrow, everybody had to go to church and chapel and say a little prayer for, because these people are obviously better than us. You can tell that just by looking at the colour of their skin. They're obviously clearly better than us. But these particular people are state-sanctioned saints, so the government has said that it's okay to go and do anything you like, really, as long as you say you're doing it on behalf of these saints. So good luck with that one, lads. Fill your boots.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a shame because, in their circles, in the past they would have held people like this, like, in this kind of esteem as the likes of Malcolm Shabazz, Malcolm X, and Dr. Martin Luther King. And in current times, they have somebody like a Thomas Sowell. Why? It's the patroning of fairly low rent individuals. If that's the hill you want to die on, then go right ahead. But you're actually making you're actually making fools of yourselves because you've got far better candidates.
Yeah, but they never get put forward. The likes of your Thomas Sowell or Larry Elder or Jesse Lee Peterson's another good one as well.
Another one that they have got, which is in them circles, is a fella called Ta-Nehisi Coates, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
and I saw a post from a British bloke who allegedly, it was an article, I think it was in the Groniad or something like that, where it was this Bamer fella, and he was writing a letter to his son. That's actually a rip-off of the first paragraph of one of Ta-Nehisi Coates' fairly glib and bland novels. Which obviously was Booker Prize award, and they have to over promote. It was shit. It was poor writing. It was disjointed. And this letter that Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing to his son was about how his friend had been murdered by a policeman, and it drolls on and drolls on and drolls on. And about 8 or 9 pages in, you find out that the policeman who shot him was actually black. But that bit's left out. So you've got all of this thing, and then it's basically casted off like, it was because of the white man's oppression, this kind of thing. And the problem is when you do get people who are candidates, I mean, not Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's just another race baiter in the same manner as Professor Kahindi Andrews mold. But when you do get somebody like a Thomas Sowell or whatever, who have got the academic acumen and also the gravity to pull it off, basically, to be able to say, yeah, well, I can debate any bugger because I'm probably cleverer than most of anybody out there, which is probably true. There are the outliers out there, and but as they won't elevate him because what they'd like to do, he's the slur that they use within their own ranks. He's an Uncle Tom. He works for the man. He's a this, he's a that. If all of the people who is calling Thomas Sowell these ridiculous names, and actually strive to be as good as Thomas Sowell, then maybe all this, we built the entire world bollocks might be a reality, But unfortunately, we know what the reality is. You didn't build anything, not like that, and all this. Yeah, that's the old. That's the old Animal Farm thing there.
Listen, man, all lives are equal, but some lives are more equal than others.
Yeah,
because Black Lives Matter more.
Yeah, because obviously in that book, Snowball was the socialist, and then what was the one that came after the one that set his dogs on Snowball? What was the one that came out? I can't remember. I'm struggling to remember the Animal Farm.
It's been a while, mate. It's been a while.
I'll check because it'll do me in. There we go. Head Pig and Animal Farm.
I did like that though. I enjoyed that. That sat next to those stats.
Napoleon, that's the one. Napoleon,
that's the one.
That's the one.
That says it all, but doesn't it? Cool. Well, was there anything else you wanted to chat about next, Simpson? I know you wanted to. Was that have a word about Germany?
Well, it was just once again the continued narrative push. As soon as anything sort of natural happens, it's automatically put down to climate change, which is nonsensical. Now we have, we've got these floods in Germany, very, very bad floods, cost a lot of lives. and it's been, the sole reason for this is climate change. But they had floods of that nature going back hundreds of years ago. These things do tend to happen. They don't happen often, thank God, but they do happen. So trying to excuse it off as everything being climate change, it's lazy. It's lazy political plaudits, basically, because they're saying, yeah, we haven't been dredging rivers, or we haven't been making sure that there's enough floodplains, or etc. We've been building like buggery on places that we shouldn't have been, and that's eroded the natural catchment areas for these water, catchment areas, etc. Like the natural catchment areas. They won't go there. It was the same when we had the floods down south and in Wales. There used to be, I think it was a biannual dredging of some of the known sort of bottlenecks in rivers, where they knew that if they didn't dredge them, that would cause, could potentially, if it got a blockage, cause severe flooding. But when they do the dredging, obviously there is an impact on the environment, because any sort of rock-based wildlife that might be there, has to skedaddle in a hurry, or, it gets things. So once again, you get the pearl clutches there saying, oh, but this caddisfly larvae, it might be destroyed if you dredge that section of the river. Okay, we'll just have 3,000 homes underwater then. That's much better than a little caddisfly larvae getting its comeuppance. So I see where the equality is there in that particular argument. So over in Germany, they've got exactly the same problems we have. You've got too many pearl clutches and hand wringers who say, oh, you shouldn't do this. Same with forest fires. People used to do controlled burning to create barriers in California and all of those states, and the same in Australia, where it was banned. Controlled burning was banned in the States. The next thing, oh, because of climate change, Australia's been nothing to do with climate change, because you didn't let them do the controlled burning because of environment. Yeah. So instead of having a small, localized, contained fire, you've now got a fire that spreads over most of the state. Whereas you could have controlled that with this localized burning. But because you were screaming that, oh, that's bad for the environment, what we're actually propagating is an even bigger environmental catastrophe. But as soon as that environmental catastrophe happens, oh, that's because of climate change. It's not because of your interference in things that was being done for decades, if not hundreds of years, thousands of years, maybe sometimes.
Yeah,
your interference.
Yeah. Sorry, like you were saying, it was seen as proven to be so. Like, for example, in California, that not taking the forests is the reason why there was such bad disease. That right? That was evident. That was proven. That was. Sorry, on you comment.
Well, it's like I say, this is now the new scapegoat, because the sniffle. Well, the sniffle's dying down now. They've already got one in the back pocket with this 60,000 flu deaths predicted. So that'll just do the merry-go-round on lockdowns and vaccination and the usual shite, basically just to keep us bound over for as long as possible. But because that's faded out, they've already tried conflating climate change with the lockdowns and COVID already. Excuse me, they've already tried to conflate those two things and how good it would be for the environment. It's fell flat on its face. Fallen flat on its face. People don't give a shit about the environment and the climate change. I'm sorry, but there it is, because they tried that narrative ahead of the COVID narrative with St. Greta Thunberg going around telling everybody, how dare you, trying to push this climate fear on people. Klaus Schwab sat there and there's a problem with the climate changes. It's going to be this. No, it fucking isn't, mate. You're just a lying bullshitter bastard. You only take the graph from 1963 because that shows an upward trend between 1963 to 2010 or 2020, whenever the last measurement was. But if you expand that graph, which is NASA's own data going back to 1900, temperatures on average have been much higher across that last century and into the new one than they are currently. Yeah. And there is no correlation between the amount of CO2. CO2, they say, oh, well, CO2 is a byproduct of energy production and meat eating and shit like that. Yeah. So
That's it. They can call me any names at all, but can't call us liars, mate. That's the way it is. I have a picture here of Klaus Schwab, but I'm not sure if it is him. But if I stick it up, you lads can tell me.
Is it the picture from when he was in Thunderball, or
that one?
When he was in Thunderball? I was going to say, I thought you were going to drag out the picture of him when he was in Thunderball, or You Only Live Twice.
No, I mean, I'm genuine, mate. That is him.
I mean, what in the hell is that?
It's someone of these sissies or something like that.
It's either him or Buster Bloodvessel's lost a bit of weight. You know what I mean?
I think it's him, mate. This is the person who's trying to tell us how to run our lives.
Jesus.
You know what I mean? We need to listen to this, man. Yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it's him.
Look, I mean, what he's got a doily round his chap. I mean, for God's sake, what's going on?
Fucking weirdos, mate. Weirdos.
I mean,
but they know better than us. They know better than us. Know what I mean? We need to totally change the planet and listen to what this guy's telling us.
Well, there was an interesting one. There's a chap. He's predominantly doing his stuff on Odyssey now because YouTube keep yeeting him a bit like Dave Cullen. A chap called James Corbett of the Corbett Report.
Oh yeah. I've watched him.
And he did an hour-long special. It's actually still available on YouTube. An hour-long special.
Is that the one where he's got them all in the chat? All the different
World Economic Forum.
Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah. That's bloody good. It starts off like a transmission, isn't it?
But he let go. You know the one where it says he talks about the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all these in link in lockstep with Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Mm-hmm. The one where he says like, "Oh, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy." That's actually been taken down now, although it's still available on ArchiveNet sites. And you can still find it. But what you find is that when they want to push a particular narrative, I mean, you've got Klaus Schwab there, you know, he comes on, he goes, and the only way that we can do this is if we take all of everything that you own and we own it instead. And it's like, you know, if I was a PR bloke like an Ivor Cummins, like, you know what, Klaus, mate, I tell you what, you take a back seat on the old media stuff because it's not having the right effect. What do you mean? Yeah, well, have you ever, you know, in the wide ranks, have you seen this franchise of films called James Bond? I've heard of this. Well, you sound like every fucking baddie in those films, mate. I'm sorry, but you just do. And it's not working well. So we need to get different characters on. So what they'll roll out is fairly innocuous, whiny, nasally American ladies, you know, who don't pose, like, appear as though they don't pose any threat, to deliver exactly the same message. And they'll come and go, hi, I'm coming on here to tell you all about the Great Reset and how wonderful it's going to be. You probably think that I'm just an ordinary person, but actually I'm really evil. I would take the fetus from your stomach and eat it right now and crush its brains onto my toast like penne. You know, it's just, you know, they're all evil fuckers. They're all in it together, but they try and push these fucking narratives all the time. And so, like I say, everything can... They've got narratives to push, and this is how brilliant these, you know, the globalists are, the elites, if you like, in society. They have pre-canned, irrespective of what the talking point is or what issue is or any particular happening, they'll immediately have two arguing points. So if they gain success from something, it'll be promoted as being, and the reason for this success is because of the global cooperation of all peoples and nations. If it goes against the narrative and doesn't have the success, they'll say the reason why this failed is because of the lack of global cooperation. So basically, they're just pushing for more and more globalization around the world, you know, basically, like I say, creating essentially for the global elites and the people who will become what's the word, stewards, essentially. So the likes of your Boris Johnson, your Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern in bloody New Zealand, they just become stewards, and they'll just be dictating the instructions from the feudal lords that sit above them, and everybody else, like the ordinary people in those countries, just basically become, you know, have to exist in communist states. That's the way it is, and it's even worse than that. Because one of the other things was, like, nasally, whiny American woman on that same video was talking about universal, a form of universal income, but they weren't talking about money or, you know, bank balances. They're talking about credits. Now the problem is when you talk about this, which is like, well, we're a universal credit scheme or whatever, but it's not going to be in a monetary value. It's basically going to be credits, and you'll be allotted this number of credits each month. But at the end of the month, whatever credits you have left don't get rolled over. You'll go back to, you know, so if you get 1,000 credits a month that you can spend on the shit that they deem palatable for you to be spending on. So you can't buy booze, you can't buy meat. Or if you can, you'll get like 100 credits docked off your next week's score. You know what I mean? They'll say, well, we're not stopping you from buying it, but one piece of meat is your 1,000 credits for the month. You know, it'll be something ridiculous, like, just like, you know, we're not stopping you, you know, we're not saying you have to have the jib jab, but if you don't, you can't work, or if you don't, you can't travel, or if you don't, you can't do all of the normal things that you have to do in normal life. So effectively, it becomes, that's the way it becomes. So the reason for that is because if you can't bank, you know, like on your minutes on your phone, you know, and we bank your minutes, that kind of thing. No, that's not going to happen. You get 1,000 credits this month, and on the 30th or 31st or 28th of that month, it resets, and then you get 1,000 credits on the 1st of the following month. The reason for that is it prevents you actually accruing wealth. It prevents you from saving, and therefore, because you can't save, you can never accrue wealth, and because you cannot accrue wealth, you're always going to be dependent on the state. Hence, feudalism for the elites at the top, communism for everybody else below. It's absolutely disgusting. And they'll conflate all of these narratives, whether or not it's climate, whether or not it's viruses, whether or not it's equity amongst peoples. They'll keep pushing these narratives, but it all leads to one thing. They want to control and run absolutely everything in the world, and everybody else has to eat shit. And that's basically what it is.
Well, it is something to be marvelled at, the way they can just sculpt out of any situation, anything that props or anything that comes up, they can just sort of sculpt their own narrative out of it. It is an art, I think. But it's been on for so long, mate, especially with this climate change. Is that what they're calling it this year? Is it climate change? I remember when it was called the ozone layer. Remember when it was ozone layer? Then it was global warming. Then it was global cooling. Now it's climate changes. or is it severe weather conditions? They just keep changing the terminology around it once they get debunked. They carry on with what they're saying. Well, this is the reasons that you need to give us all these powers. This is the reasons, know what I mean? But it's not.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, you know, Al Gore, Prince
so see,
Charles.
the longer you go and the older you get, the more of these instances you can see. I think that's how they prey on the youth, no, because they're just not that experienced. Once you've been around a few times, you know the government is in no way got your best interest at their heart. You know what I mean? It's the exact opposite.
Right, exactly. And you look at Prince Charles. He's been banging on about climate change for I think since I was a baby. And you got Al Gore, you know, fails to become president, and then becomes this sort of climate czar, flying all over the planet, knocking up God knows how much CO2 into the environment, to help people. You know, if he was that bothered about, you know, it's just ridiculous. But they all come, you know, like, you know, after Gore lost the election in 2000, because obviously the election is held in 2000, they take office in 2000, I believe in 2001. When Gore lost that, he becomes this climate czar, and he says the planet will die in 2012, and somebody made a movie called 2012. You know, Prince Charles, he says, oh, the planet's only got till 2010. You even had the idiot bloody Gordon Brown saying, when he was premier, you know, this planet hasn't got much long after 2014 if something's not done right now, blah, blah, blah. So they keep pushing these same things. Charlie Boy's been saying that since 1980, Gorgon, you know, and all these different ones that are in this sort of climate hysteria bubble. The thing is, when these dates come and go, you know, like I say, they give the planet, on average, they give the planet 10 years before everything becomes extinct. And every decade or so, they'll revise that by another 10 years when it doesn't come to fruition. Mm-hmm. And they try and mark every single thing as climate change and this, and our different islands are going to sink or, you know, get buried under the masses of sea rises. Well, if that was going to happen, you know, I saw a picture of the Statue of Liberty, you know, so, you know, you've got the Statue of Liberty Island there, and a picture from 1900 and a picture from now. It's never moved. It's exactly the same level, you know. But they want to keep on pushing this narrative. But in the 70s, all of these climate hysteria experts, so-called experts, were shitting themselves that we were going into a new ice age. Yeah, completely disproven. I mean, in the mid 70s, 75, 77 was some of the hottest summers we've had, and then immediately following that, well, you know, like you say, sort of into the 80s, it was all the ozone layer. Your fridges are killing the planet. The fridges are killing the planet. We need to do this. We need to do that. The ozone layer repaired itself. So then they think, shit, what can we blame next? All right, polar bears. Polar bears are dying. Polar bears are dying in record number. Polar bear figures right now have never been more healthy. And the reason why they're dying is because they're still being hunted. As soon as they stop them from being hunted, their fucking figures shot up through the roof. So once again, utter bollocks. So now we're being told, oh, warming, it's CO2 and warming. It's basically any excuse and any narrative to basically find a way of leveraging more harm and tax on the ordinary person without affecting the elite. That's all it's geared towards. And for my personal opinion, if you genuinely wanted to help the environment, you know, do the most significant thing for the environment, you just get rid of single-use plastics. That would overnight help the environment far more than all this bullshit about wind power and solar and all that crap, you know. But obviously we're quite dependent on these single-use plastics. So until somebody invests some time and effort on a different mechanism, you know, either a plastic that does biodegrade at the same rate as cardboard or something like that, which I'm sure they would have the technology to do. I'm pretty sure they would have the technology to do that. It's just that wouldn't fulfill the narrative. You know, nobody cares. That's why in
problem in this country, but mate, is there's nothing we can do to affect the globe, especially with what China and India is doing. There's pissing in the wind.
If we stopped all forms of fossil fuel energy and went completely green tomorrow, the actual impact on the amount of carbon, which, as we know, it's been proven that it has no correlation to climate, the amount of carbon in the air. I mean, it's plant food, for Christ's sake. I mean, parts of the Sahara Desert is now turning green. You know, is this a bad thing? You know, I don't know. Is it a bad thing?
I think
You know,
what you need to look is see these rich people, these politicians, and well, speaking of politicians, the picture that you're looking at on the screen is Barack Obama's house. His £9.2 million mansion, 7 bedrooms, outdoor pool, private beach, very nice.
He's got a golf hole there as well. If you look
But
there, that's a fairway.
yeah, can you see that? Can you see in the distance that the sea? That's how concerned about the rising sea levels that he is. That he just went and spent nearly 10 million quid on a house right next to the sea.
And it's not like on a hill, is it?
Listen, these people they're liars. Not the same as that Al Gore when he made his movie about the end of the world, and then he moved to some seaside resort. Some actions belie what they're saying. No, I mean what they're saying doesn't match up with their actions.
Well, the film was called, I think it was 2002. It came out, won Oscars and shit like that. It was called An Inconvenient Truth. The inconvenient truth for Al Gore is that none of his predictions have ever come true.
So, still made him a very rich person. It still made him a very rich man. And you're saying that it just keeps happening, but they keep coming out with these saying and blame it on this, but they never get called out on it. They never get held to account on.
I don't know, like I say, I don't know about the people in the chat, but one little rubric I saw from a few days ago, because climate change just isn't having, people genuinely, normal people don't care, because it had no effect prior to COVID-19. And now that they're trying to sort of amalgamate the same hysteria towards climate change, it's not having anywhere near the same effect. They don't, people, yeah, whatever. As long as we're not going to die from an illness, that's my main problem. Yeah, but climate's going to be worse. Nah, sod off. I'm going to drive my car. You can stick your child's toy battery car up your arse. I'm not having one of them. Get lost. So this is the people are not scared enough. So what they're trying to do now, once again, when they realise that the climate narrative is not, once again, the World Economic Forum has a little war game scenario, just like what they did in October of 2019, just ahead of when the pandemic hit, a little war game scenario. What happens if a novel coronavirus would suddenly sweep around the world? How would we deal with this? Well, communists for them, feudal state for us. We grab more power. They have to eat shit and die. That's what we're going to do. Okay, well, we'll bring back the climate thing. It's not having the same effect. Okay, well, we'll run another war game scenario, except this time about cyber attacks on infrastructure and food supplies. Oh, right. And then, funnily enough, just after that, we start getting cyber attacks on power supplies and food supplies and things like that. These people in the World Economic Forum, they're better predictors than Nostradamus, aren't they? They just seem to know when these things are coming out. But then the last one, because once again, people are, whatever. But I mean, if they were to do that, turn off the power, turn off the internet for a few days, or break supply chains. But what they would do is they wouldn't break the supply chains. They just need to do what they did at the start of the pandemic, just say there's shortages of shit, and it'll fly off the shelves because people are locusts. So rather than just buying what they need, there was no supply chain issue at the start of the pandemic, none whatsoever. There was no shortage of toilet roll whatsoever. People bought what they actually needed than just being greedy, selfish locusts. There would have been no supply chains problem. But by virtue of the media and that saying and potential shortages, that then triggers the locusts into grab. So they won't go around shelf stripping. There were no shortages. Supply chain was still running 24/7. In fact, the only thing that put pressure on the supply chain was the fact that the shelves were being stripped at such a rate of knots. There was no issue. It was all fabricated and hysteria driven by the nefarious bods in that sign. Well, they're trying that now, but then the last one I saw there was, giant solar flares are coming to get you. This is going to wipe out technology and stuff like that. And then, old Bill Gates there, because he's been experimenting by pumping chalk dust into the atmosphere to protect us from sunlight. So the World Economic Forum are actually developing street lamps that emit ultraviolet light, so you can stand under them and get a bit of vitamin D. And they also kill viruses, by the way. So that's another double plus. I'm not making this up. This is for real. So basically, you've got Bill Gates polluting the atmosphere with chalk dust to block natural sunlight, on the pretense of my solar flare and will try and protect you and all that, which it wouldn't protect it anyway because it's magnetic fields. So it's just more bullshit. So let's make the whole world like this grey, cloudy sky. So basically, production starts to fail again. So then people do become starving. Apart from, lo and behold, the elites who control everything by that time. And if you want your vitamin D or you want your sunlight, go and stand under one of these artificial ones. You just couldn't make it up. So, like I say, the next big thing is solar flares, and then they've got the sort of the little feed-in and put-ins of potential. It's UFO activities. Now because if all else fails, they'll just say, oh yeah, we know that there's intelligent life and we need to collectivize together. And the best way to do that, the best way to protect us from any kind of invasion from outside of our planet, is to give more and more control to us because we know what we're doing, and you can all live like communists. They all head to all paths lead to Rome. Well, all of these bollocks narratives that come from every single angle all lead to global dominion over everything.
Yeah, no, spot on, mate. Being honest. I've got a little white pill. I don't know if you know who Sean King is. Do you know who Sean King is? Calcomex.
I'm saying that, yeah.
Do you know who that is, Sean King?
No.
Calcomex.
Not a fan. I might know him beside.
This is the white guy that pretends that he's black and then runs about race baiting everything, blaming white people on everything, and yeah, he's finally been yeeted from Twitter. I don't know why.
I thought it was Keith Lemon.
But I don't know why, but that is to be celebrated that he's no longer on Twitter because he's just poisonous, that guy.
Was it just funny? Was it a bit like Bo Selector? And that's like taboo now. So you got Keith Lemon proselytizing himself.
I think it was TYT he used to work for. He worked for him, Tucks and Pleasure, isn't it? He was one of their roving reporters. Or is it reporter at large or something like that? But yeah, I thought that was a wee white pill for everybody. Seeing him being removed from Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know the bloke, to be honest. But if he's anything to do with the young turds, I won't have bothered with him anyway. But if that's a good thing, then yeah, happy days. Well, is it happy days? Well, I suppose it is because it makes a change. I mean, I just wonder what he did wrong, because he must have upset somebody in the wrong angles to get yeeted, because they don't feed on their own usually. The little in-groups do, but he it's like, they keep on blocking and banning Stephen Crowder, who is now exceeded and surpassed the Young Turks, and he does some serious stuff, but it's done with a little comedic edge. But every single thing that Stephen Crowder reports on and does, he has to publish all of the facts and figures, because he knows that if he doesn't, there's some grubby little oik sat in the background there, in his mother's basement working for YouTube or whoever, beavering away, just trying to disprove and find any kind of fault whatsoever, just so that he can strike the channel. I mean, Crowder's got a court case out with YouTube at the moment for that very kind of activity. So we'll see how that goes. But as we know now, even if it gets to the Supreme Court, which is a relevant thing in the States and not in our country, that should be disbanded immediately. Another Tony Blair invention. Even if it reaches the Supreme Court, all of those judges that Trump put in there to allegedly give a sort of a more right-leaning bias, they've just all been proved to be as much of cooks as the rest of them. They will vote based on what feathers their nest. There is no honesty anymore, and that's politicians, the laws, legal circles, they're all media circles. They're all just as bad as each other. They all work for the monster. And so, you know, take every single thing that you see coming out of their circles with a pinch of salt, because there's always some message behind it. And if the message succeeds, they've got a story to back it up that says, and this is a good reason why this is. And if it doesn't succeed, they've got to back it up. And the reason why it didn't succeed is because you lot are not, you know, are not as compliant as you should be. And that, like I say, that's what it boils down to. That's literally it.
Right, no spot on, mate. Yeah, I was just checking there. Yes, definitely a Young Turks man. Sean King. There's a few of them they've got in there. I know they got a Scottish guy works for them. I don't know if he still does, but the last time I watched anything to do with the Young Turks, he was on there, some ginger Scottish guy, and he's just, like you say, your basic cuck. Aye. So listen, mate, I'm just going to bring us to an end. That's all right with you, Senso?
Who are you going to bring in?
I was going to bring to an end at 10.
Oh, bring it to an end. Yes. That's, like I say, I think all the stories that we had, I think we've covered, and I don't think we've disappointed the Three Amigos mantra. I think it's been.
See, I'm kind of disappointed myself, mate, because I had a few bits of video to play, but every time I try to play any other open another window on this Chromebook, it just starts to.
Have you got any different mechanism, like a laptop or desktop?
Yeah, I'm on a Chromebook at the moment. I've got like tablet and phones and whatnot. But yeah, I need to get myself a PC, mate. I was on my son's PC. I was using his gaming PC, which is really, really nice. Yeah. Especially when you're just like messing about on Paul, you know what I mean? Everything's smooth. But yeah, I'll be getting I need to get another one. I definitely do. But aye. Thanks very much for joining us in that sense, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's been great. And like I say, thanks for tolerating everybody in the chat. I do apologise, resisting the lies. You got a bit raggy about the gadget there. But but yeah, so yeah, I think it's been okay. So are we going to, because we got the graphic on the thumbnail? Are we going to do it? Or should we go out properly in style, mate? Do you want to say a couple of things, and we'll go out in the style we should have done?
Yeah, I don't like putting a graphic in a thumbnail yet. That's
no, the one that was used for the post that you used in Telegram. But
oh right, yeah.
If you're gonna, are we wrapping up now?
Yeah, no, look, go ahead. I'll give it a couple more minutes, mate, if you want.
No, because I was just going to say, when we do wrap up, we said we'd do the old the proper exit, as it were, and hopefully the people will realise what it is.
It's putting a bit of a strain on my technical abilities, trying to share stuff, mate. And all that.
Aye.
Especially when I just learned to do that like about an hour ago.
Yeah, I mean, Rob's there saying try Edge browser, but it's a Chromebook, Rob. It's actually Google's own technology, so it's obviously got filters on that detects our people.
Yeah, it's not very good, mate. I wouldn't recommend this to anybody.
Yeah,
these Chromebooks, mate, and that's like £200 this was, but
yeah. Well,
need double it.
It's more than enough. It just, like I say, it must pickle the CPU time, so it robots your sound. Yeah.
Bye.
Right, then. Are you ready, sir?
Go on.
And it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night, folks.